Curious Lloyd.
We've all told a few little white lies before. Some of us have even lied about being sick, when in fact you just can't be bothered to go into work with the hell it holds. Or maybe the stupid lies you say in which you have to question yourself into saying whether it was really worth lying about that certain thing. Although some of the strangest people out there have managed to get so far with such ridiculous lies that it makes it quite worrying. Someone wrote a tell-all book about being a White House chef without actually being one. Meet Ronnie Seaton, a man who never saw inside the presidential fridge, but he did write a book on it. Ronnie Seaton's book, Sir White House Chef, reads like a bad fan fiction, which is kind of impressive, given that he's written about it himself. Seaton claimed that he served as a White House chef starting in 1982, when he wowed a Ronald Reagan with his cooking skills. Although, you have to forgive the publishers for not catching his deception, because it's full of believable stories, as seeing George W. Bush leave marijuana butts around the White House and sleeping with Condoleezza Rice. And of course, who doesn't want to sign an American chef with British knighthood? Well, after working a White House dinner, the Queen attended with fellow super chefs Wolfgang Puck, Bobby Flay, and Emma Lagasse. Helping in the kitchen, she asked him for his dessert recipe. He ended up cooking Christmas dinner for her in England. But nobody tells this better than the Grand Knight Seaton. In case you've noticed, there is indeed one tiny mistake in his retelling. Americans knighted by the Queen can't call themselves Sir or Dame. And another mistake, Americans don't get the sword, nor do they kneel. And the description of the Queen's favourite knighting sword is wrong. But also, the Queen doesn't knight people for cooking her one meal. But when the New York Post called Seaton with a general question and asked him, is this really the real deal? He clarified that his title really is Sir Dr. Master Chef. The doctor is because he has a PhD in foodology from Cornell. A fake bishop bluffed his way into a meeting to get a peek at the next pope. You could say in this moment of time, we live in a fast-paced culture. Most people want to know things as quickly as someone can type 140 characters on Twitter. But the City of Vatican moves at its own pace. So for a while in 2013, there wasn't a more closely guarded secret than who was going to become the new pope. But while the rest of us had to wait patiently, an enterprising Christian decided to turn the question into an exercise, disguising himself as a bishop from a non-existent order, Corpus Dei, and trying to bust through 20 rows of Swiss guards into the most hallowed of chambers. This is the story of Bishop Ralph Napierski. When the new pope was being chosen, Napierski arrived in Rome with an entire outage of fake clergy. With a lot of bluster, they managed to make it past at least one stage of security, but they were all stopped because someone noticed the cassock and the crucifix were slightly too short. He also didn't manage to put one over on the guards by claiming that he was a representative of an Italian Orthodox church. So, who is this mysterious rogue religious icon? According to his own website, Bishop Basilius is a promoter of Jesus yoga and wants to put a relic in every poor Christian's home. But one thing's for sure, Napierski will never become a real bishop. A six-time felon lived in an army barracks for months. There are certain things we need to believe that are utterly secure, an army base or our internet browser history. Although the place where soldiers sleep, not so much. In 2015, Fort Bragg officials discovered that some random guy had been living in their barracks for months, eating their meals ready to eat. The civilian was posing as an explosive ordnance disposal specialist, which is perhaps the most worrisome detail you could probably add to the story, and had 6 prior felony charges from 2014 alone. But you're probably thinking, how did this happen? Well, the security system was broken, and no one seemed that concerned about getting it fixed, so people got used to him being there. He was seen giving orders to other soldiers, and giving new recruits their room assignments, and correctly employing the ancient military tradition of shouting at the right rank and shutting up when someone with bigger epaulets walks by. In fact, security overall at the barracks was so bad that after he was discovered, they had to change the locks of 26 rooms because the keys couldn't be found. But probably the main reason this infiltrator was able to move about freely for so long was because of the kind-heartedness. Military investigators believed that some of the soldiers felt sorry for him because he was apparently homeless. It was only after he became a danger to others that his cover was blown, although he was caught after being arrested for drink driving. But after being caught, he was released on his own reconnaissance and later failed to show up in court to answer some of those earlier charges. Lots of adults have posed as school students. Can you remember when you watched 21 Jump Street? You may have thought, Channing Tatum looks like he could have any teenager that he wants, but to impersonate one, probably not a chance. But surely, it's impossible for a grown man or woman to possess the right to look like one. But it turns out that plenty of adults have tried to relive the past, quite literally by going back to school. The most extreme example is probably this 52-year-old man who enrolled in school with the clever use of forged papers, with being insultingly emotional and having an unrealistic backstory, which was sexual abuse, abuser's suicide, and throat cancer, which prevented him from speaking, and of course, sunglasses. But he didn't really last the day in school, although the fact he even sat down behind a school desk is kind of alarming. But then there's this other guy who pretended to be Steven Spielberg's nephew for whatever strange reason. He changed his name to Jonathan Taylor Spielsberg, then attended Fairfax VA High School whilst claiming to be a 14-year-old, and then parking a BMW with a Spielberg number plate in the principal space. He was in his 20s when this happened, and he said he just did it for fun, to get the experience he never had. So you could say there are some very worrying people living in this small world. People pretended to survive the Holocaust to sell books. The Holocaust was obviously a historically tragic and monstrous event that most of us can't imagine suffering through, but a bunch of sad psychotic people have given it a shot, pretending they were a part of history's greatest tragedy as a way of getting attention. The following tits are two such people. For years, Joseph Hurt gave public speeches concerning his time he spent in a concentration camp. Hurt's story started with seeing Hitler turn his back on Jesse Owens at the Olympics, which didn't happen, then segued into his arrest, after which he was placed in Auschwitz. There he met Mengele, the psychotic doctor who was obsessed with twins, before escaping under a fence. After making his way to the United States, he ended up meeting Eleanor Roosevelt and Jesse Owens. When people set their forgiving sympathy aside to doubt this incredible crap, Hearst barely apologized, claiming that he did it to keep the memories of the Holocaust alive, despite the fact that his memories are very poor lies. Then there's the famous memoir fragments, Memories of a Wartime Childhood, by Benjamin Wilkomersky, which was hailed as an achingly beautiful and one of the greatest works of the Holocaust, delving into the true horror of the era, like babies devouring their own fingers. Except it turned out that Benjamin Wilkomersky was really Bruno Dossecker, a man who lived out the war in relative comfort in Switzerland. If it wasn't for a journalist named Daniel Ganzerfried, a Jewish journalist who has reporter's instincts that Lewis Lane would be proud of, people might still be hailing the book as a masterpiece of non-fiction instead of a shocking lie about imagined human suffering.